Hi, today we're going to be discussing ecosystem interactions. So let's go first with habitat. What is a habitat? It is a place or shelter where living things live. For example, a human have a house, a bird has a nest, and then the fish have the waters, a snake have the forest. This is the habitat where they live. Now, in this world, living things have a role in the environment, in which this is what we call the niche. So this indicates the mission of the organism, which is three: to find shelter, to find food, and then to mate. Like what our parents did for us. They find shelter, they find food, and then they mate. And that's what we're gonna do as well in our life. And then that's how other organisms do as well. Even a bird, they create a nest, they find food, and then they mate. So now we need to understand that there are community interactions with regards to organisms. So this can be divided into three things. The first thing is competition. This is when organisms compete for the same food. An example of this is different birds. They compete for the same worm. Even fish compete for the same worm, right? This is when these organisms, they are different, but they compete for one scarce resource, which is the worm. That's the first one, the competition. Now the second one is predation. Predation happens when one organism eats another, consumes another. For example of this is a wolf eating a rabbit. It eats it. And a fish eating a larger fish. This is predation, when one organism eats another organism. Now, the third thing is symbiosis. This is when two organisms live together. So the example of this will be in the following. Let's first divide the symbiosis, and since there are many interactions in symbiosis. The first one is commensalism. Commensalism happens when one organism benefits while the other is not harmed nor benefits from it. An example of this is one barnacle. It sticks into a whale. The whale is not affected, it does not benefit from it, or is harmed by it. It's just chill, man. But then, this barnacle, he benefits from it. How? He gets food when the whale moves, because of the planktons. So this is one way, commensalism. Only one benefits, but the other is not harmed or is gaining from it. Now, the next one will be parasitism. Now, this is also a form of symbiosis, but in this one is affected in the downgrade, negatively affected. It is actually harmed, while the other is benefiting. So a parasite, like for example, a mite or tick from a dog, is a form of parasitism. The tick sticks to the dog, it drinks its blood, it procreates and creates more ticks and drinks more blood. So the tick is benefiting from the interaction, but the dog is getting harmed by it because it's gonna get sick, it's gonna get ill, and then gonna die. That is parasitism. Now the third thing is mutualism. Mutualism is when two of the organisms gain from the interaction. For example of this is a bee and a flower. So when the bee goes to the flower, what does it do? It drinks the nectar, have himself some food, which when he goes home, of the pollen, the nectar can be converted to honey, which will then be used by the colony as food. That is the benefit for the bee. But then the flower also benefits because the flower has pollens, and its pollens is the one that makes it reproduce. So when the bee sticks into it, the skin of the bee or the follicles in the bee will have the pollen of the flower, so that when the bee transfers to another flower, the pollen of the first flower will be able to reproduce with the second flower. So it's a win-win for the flower because he can mate, he can create more babies, and then have more flowers. So that is beneficial for the both of them. Now, let's go to the food chain and the food web. What's the difference, Siren? You might ask yourself. Well, here, A food chain seems to be more linear. So for example, the producer, first consumer, second consumer, and the last consumer, and the composer. Only one line. This is the food chain. A series of events in a one line. But then, in a food web, it is much more complex because this is actually interconnection of the food chain. So in the food web, there are many food chains that comes together. For example, worm gets eaten by a fish. The fish gets eaten by the bird, and another food chain happens to be the worm gets eaten by the bird directly, and then the fish gets eaten by the cat, and the cat also eats the bird. Something like that. It's much more complicated.
Hi, it's me again, Katrina, and now let's move on to the classification of animals according to their diet. The first classification are carnivores. Basically, those are animals that only fed on meats and fleshes of other animals. Like for example, lions that fed on hyenas and sharks that fed on other fishes. Those are carnivores. The second classification are herbivores. Those animals are the exact opposite of the first one I mentioned, the carnivores that only fed on meats. These herbivores only fed on plants. Like for example, cows, giraffes, and zebras. Those are herbivores. The last classification are called omnivores. Those are animals that eat both plants and animals. Now, we humans are the best example of omnivores because we literally eat vegetables and meats at the same time. Now let's talk about the three domains, the bacteria, archaeobacteria, and eukarya. Let's talk about the bacteria first. Bacteria are microscopic organisms, meaning you cannot see them through your naked eyes but the use of microscope only. They are unicellular, meaning single-celled organisms, and independently reproducing, meaning they can reproduce on their own without any mate, unlike us, and they are free-living as well. Archaeobacteria are a group of single-celled prokaryotic organisms but with biochemistry and RNA markers that are distinct from bacteria and eukarya. And the last one is eukarya. This is the world's visible living things. We humans actually belong in this domain, eukarya. It includes kingdoms protists, fungi, plantae, and animalia. Now let's move on to the 6 kingdoms of life, namely animalia, plantae, fungi, protista, eubacteria, and archaeobacteria. The first kingdom, animalia, this is where humans actually belong. Kingdom plantae, from the word itself plant, this is where plants do belong. Kingdom fungi obtain food by absorbing materials in their body. For example, they are mushrooms and molds. Once they were categorized as part of plant kingdom, however, when they found out that they cannot do photosynthesis, then they were recategorized as fungi. The kingdom protista was introduced by the German biologist Ernst Haeckel in 1866 to classify microorganisms which are neither plants nor animals. Meaning they cannot categorize this kingdom as if they were animals or plants. Or since protists are quite irregular, this kingdom is the least understood, and the genetic similarities between organisms in this kingdom are largely unknown. The kingdom Eubacteria are bacteria that are made up of small cells. They lack of nucleus and cell organelles. Their cell walls are made up of peptidoglycan. The last kingdom is called the archaeobacteria, which are bacteria that live in extreme environments such as salt lakes or hot acidic spring. These bacteria are in their own category as detailed studies have shown that they have unique properties and features. For example, they have unusual lipids that are not found in any other organisms. That's why they differ from other bacteria and which allow them to live where they live. If bacteria have cell walls made of peptidoglycan, these archaeobacteria lacks peptidoglycan in their cell walls. Now let's talk about the phylum Chordata. Actually, there are 9 major animal phylum, but I have to focus on this phylum Chordata because this is the phylum where us humans belong. But anyway, let's have a short recap about the 9 animal phylums. The first one is a phylum Porifera, which has approximately 10,000 species. Basically, those are sponges, invertebrate animals that live in aquatic habitats. The second one is a phylum Nidaria. They're aquatic invertebrate animals. To make it simple, they are jellyfishes, coral sea anemones, hydras, etc. Third phylum is a phylum Platyhelminths, which has approximately 25,000 species. They are flatworms with bilateral body symmetry. They can be found in marine or freshwater. The fourth phylum is the phylum Nematoda with approximately 80,000 species. They are roundworms with very long and narrow body. The fifth one is the phylum Annelida with approximately 17,000 species. They have long bodies that have segments divided externally by shallow rings. The sixth one is the phylum Mollusca with approximately 85,000 species. This one is one of the largest phyla composed of many diverse organisms. For example, octopus, snails, oysters. That's one. The seventh phylum is a phylum Echinodermata with approximately 17,000 species. This species dwells at the bottom of the ocean floor. For example, starfishes, sea lilies, and sea urchins. The eighth phylum is the phylum Arthropoda. This phylum is the largest with approximately 3,700,000 species. They are considered the insects, for example, lobsters, crabs, spiders, mild centipedes, and millipedes. And the last one is the phylum Chordata, where we belong. Phylum Chordata has approximately 43,700 species. They have internal skeletal rod, a complete digestive system, a ventral heart, a closed blood system, and a tail. For example, sharks, fishes, lizards, frogs, and us humans. Now, these are the classes under phylum Chordata. The first one is class Agnatha. They have nodules, ill-shaped, and they prey on fishes. They have larval form different from adults. Actually, I don't know what kind of fish is this, but yeah, you can define it from their body shape. Right. The second one is the class Amphibia. They are the first land vertebrates that especially go through metamorphosis, and they are cold-blooded. To make it simpler in explanation, they live in water when they are young. They live in land when they are adults. The best example of this class Amphibia are frogs. When they are young, they are just tadpoles. They swim in water, but as they grow adults, they live in land. The next class shall be continued by the next speaker.
Class Aves. Birds. Their key characteristic is that they have feathers. Birds are warm-blooded. Also, birds are known to lay eggs when they give birth. It also identified birds as almost all of them fly. Some do not, like penguins and ostrich. The reason is that their body is heavy compared to their wings. Class Chondrichthyes. They have cartilage skeleton, not bone. They are buoyant, thus they can swim. Species in this class have paired fins, hard scales, a two-chambered heart, and a pair of nostrils. Most species have 5 to 7 gill slits on each side of their body. Examples are cartilaginous fishes, rays, and sharks. Class Mammalia. They have fur or hair and mammary glands which produces milk for the young. We humans are class Mammalia, for we have hair, mammary gland, and give birth to babies that need milk. Some are also examples of mammalia: elephant, ox, rhino, lion, and jaguar. Class Osteichthyes, bonefish. Their swim bladder is an air sac controlling buoyancy. They can hold still at any depth and not sink. Popularly referred to as the bony fish, is a diverse taxonomic group of fish that have skeletons primarily composed of bone tissues. They can be contrasted with chondrichthyes, which have skeleton primarily composed of cartilage. Class Reptilia. They have scales and are dry for touch and are cold-blooded. Their eggs have leathery shell. Living reptiles comprise turtles, crocodilians, and squamates like lizards and snakes. Order under Class Mammalia. Rodentia, small plant eater, like hamster and squirrel. Chiroptera are flying animals or mammals which are primary fruit or insect eaters. Most of them are bats. Insectivora, small burrowing mammals, mostly are insect eater which spends most of their time underground, like shrews and hedgehog. Marsupialia, pouched mammals. The young develop in abdominal pouch, like wombats and macropods. Carnivora, carnivorous predators like bears and otters. Primates or tree dwellers. They have large brain size, binocular vision and opposable tongue, like gorillas and tarsiers. Artiodactyla, hoofed mammals with 2 or more toes, mostly are herbivores like deers and giraffe. Cetacea, fully marine mammals. Examples of these are whales and dolphins. Lagomorphia, rodent-like jumpers with 4 upper incisors. Their hind legs are often longer than the foreleg, an adaptation for jumping like pikas and hares. Suborder Pinnipedia are marine carnivores like seals and sea lions. Edentata are toothless insect eaters. Some are toothless but others have degenerate peg-like teeth. Examples are sloths and anteaters. Perissodactyla, hoofed mammals with 1 or 3 toes. Examples are horses and rhinos. Proboscidea, long-trunked herbivores having 2 upper incisors elongated as tusks. They are the largest living land animals. Example is an elephant. Adult human, male and female. Like us, we have classification. Our domain is Eukarya, Kingdom Animalia, Phylum Chordata, Class Mammalia, Order Primates, Family Hominidae, Genus Homo, and species are Homo sapien.